Hello and welcome to the WonderBaba podcast. My name is Sheena Mitchell. I'm a pharmacist and mum of 3. I'm here to chat all about child and family health. I combine healthcare and practical advice to help you on your parenting journey. I really hope you enjoy the show. Today I'll be speaking to Rachel Murray, an ambassador for CF Ireland. We'll be discussing her 2-year-old daughter Eva's journey with cystic fibrosis. We'll chat all about her diagnosis, what life is like since, what life is like now, how it impacts their day-to-day life, how Rachel coped and still copes with her daughter's diagnosis. And Rachel explains beautifully and clearly the journey that a family will go through on diagnosis of their child. Of course, at the end, we talk about all of the reasons why there is so much hope for the future. I am delighted to partner with one of my all-time favourite products, Saline Plus. This is the world's first 100% natural dry salt therapy device. It's clinically proven to relieve a wide variety of allergens and respiratory conditions. This salt therapy method has been trusted for generations and has become hugely popular worldwide as more and more people recognise the superb results achieved from a natural and non-invasive method. This device will help you breathe easier and sleep better. Ireland has one of the highest global incidences of cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that primarily affects the lungs and digestive system. The symptoms of cystic fibrosis are caused by a defect in the CFTR gene. This gene normally regulates and controls the amount and composition of the fluid in the airways and other organs. Normally, this fluid is thin and clear and works to lubricate our organs to protect them from infection. In CF patients, this genetic control of protective mucus is not working correctly, and it can result in excessive sticky secretions, which can block up the airways and lead to increased infections. It also blocks the flow of digestive enzymes from the pancreas into the gut. This causes impaired digestion and poor absorption of food. Not all children are affected equally or in the same way. Cystic fibrosis affects only 1 in 1,600 children in Ireland, so a diagnosis can be overwhelming and frightening, as you may not understand much about it before your child is diagnosed. Cystic Fibrosis Ireland is a huge support and an amazing resource for parents. Your child will also be cared for and treated by cystic fibrosis specialists who have full expertise in the treatments your child needs. These 2 groups of people help you manage your child's cystic fibrosis and teach you when to seek help. Medicine has advanced significantly over recent years, and a CF diagnosis is no longer as difficult as it once was. Life expectancy and lifestyle has improved so dramatically due to new treatments, and there is every hope advancements will continue in this positive way. Hi Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Sheena, thank you so much for having me on.
So tell me a little bit about you and before your life with children.
Before my life with children, that was different. I worked in theatre production all through my 20s and into my 30s. And then, I worked freelance mainly for different theatre companies and did a lot of travel, tour management and production stuff for different companies. And until I was about 34, I was working for Riverdance. I worked for them over the years, and I was working for them at the time when I was pregnant with my son, James, who was born in 2018.
Okay, So a big dramatic change then to bedtime, basically.
Yeah.
So James is now 4, is that right?
Yeah, he's 4.5. He's still in Montessori. So his last year in Montessori and then to big school next year.
Okay, so James was born a happy, healthy baby.
He was, he was born, in February 2018, and first pregnancy and first baby, and it was all no COVID. COVID was not a thing at that time, and all that stuff. So it was all very happy and lovely, and we spent 5 days, 5 nights, because I had an emergency C-section, so we spent 5 nights in the hospital, and it was all a big love bubble with the new baby. It was great. I mean, they said to me, "Do you want to go home after the 4th night?" And I was like, "No. Can I stay? Can I stay tonight too, please?"
Like, there's a menu here.
Yeah.
obviously you went on to become pregnant with a second child.
I did, yeah. Like James was very much planned. Eva was very much planned. And I got pregnant very quickly with both of them, maybe a month. Like actually straight away, I think, with Eva.
God.
Like, you know, so like that we were very lucky. There was no issues there. So yeah, my pregnancies with both kids were absolutely fine. Like routine, I guess you call them what that is. But yeah, they were fine and scans were fine. And I had no issues, or the usual things of, you know, I'm tired. We felt like really lucky. And then my partner's older than me, and I was not, I realized, a spring chicken having James. Like, I think they used the word geriatric, and I was like, you can stop using that word immediately.
Oh God. It's just, yeah.
You know? So yeah. So like, yeah, we realized we were really lucky. And I think like after having James and everything going well and everything, and then with the second pregnancy, I felt really, even though it was during COVID, yeah, Eva was born in June 2020, and I still felt totally confident in my pregnancy and felt fine, you know, and felt like everything's going to be okay. You know, my last baby was okay. I feel okay. The COVID thing's scary. Like, we don't want to get COVID because we don't know what that means, being pregnant. So, you know, we were really careful, but I had such a confidence in it. Yeah.
Obviously very straightforward pregnancies, and, you know, very, well, I'm not going to say straightforward. Obviously it's an emergency section and then a planned section afterwards. But before all of that, had you any awareness of cystic fibrosis before you started having kids? Like, was it something that was on your radar?
It was on my radar, weirdly. When I worked with Riverdance, one of my colleagues' son has cystic fibrosis, and he had told me about it. He had told me about how they'd found out, the diagnosis of it. And me, at that time, not having children, you know, I listened to the story and, you know, felt like, God, that must be really hard and everything. But really, you know, I don't think I related to it on any sort of kind of really real emotional level. But like, felt for my colleague. In 2018, every year Riverdance does a kind of a charity. They have a charity partner, and in 2018, Cystic Fibrosis Ireland was the charity partner. So we did a big fundraiser at the Gaiety and for Cystic Fibrosis Ireland, and on the production team working on that. And so I had an awareness of what it was, and at the time was pregnant with James. You know, so it was on my radar, but it was never like, this is something to do with me. And even though I obviously read 1 in 19 people in Ireland can be carriers of a cystic fibrosis gene, it was just like, la, 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 that's nothing to do with me. And I remember my colleague saying that, like, when they suggested that his child might have cystic fibrosis, and he was like, oh, no, that's nothing to do with me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's something to happen to other people. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I think that's like across the board in life. Like, I remember, I don't know, my dad getting sick and stuff, and I was like, oh no, like, that's for other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think, though, that's probably a normal enough coping mechanism for life, because if you took in every bit of worry, yesterday I was driving the kids home from somewhere, and we were talking about potential holidays, and we were like, oh, we might get the ferry to Scotland because my husband's family live over there. And you know, the 7-year-old was like, what if, because they've one of the older kids had been reading a lot about the Titanic. They're like, what if it sinks? And I'm like, do you know how dangerous cars are? And you get into one of them every day. It's grand.
Yeah.
I was like, you need to not worry about stuff that isn't imminently likely, do you know? And I think that's probably what we do with any medical condition. Do you know?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. And that's fair. Like, we'd all go completely mad otherwise. It's just too much. There's too many possibilities out there. But I'm gathering from what you're saying there, you weren't aware of any carrier gene in yourself or Jason's history.
No, we weren't. Neither of us were aware of that at all, and no one in our family, and not even anyone that we're like, oh, that could have been cystic fibrosis.
I'd just like to further explain a little bit about genetics and diagnosis in cystic fibrosis. Every person carries 2 copies of every gene, one from our mother and one from our father. 1 in 19 people in Ireland are said to carry one of the altered CFTR genes. This means that they have a regular CFTR gene and a mutated gene. You do not have cystic fibrosis unless both of your copies of this gene are altered. For someone to have cystic fibrosis, both their mother and their father need to have carried at least one altered CFTR gene each. Both parents carry one faulty gene, then their child has a 25% chance of being born with cystic fibrosis. So that's a 1 in 4 chance. They have a 50% chance of being a healthy carrier, which may be like their parents are now. They mightn't have known that they were carrying the gene. And the kids will have a 25% chance of not having cystic fibrosis and not being a carrier of the altered gene. Because 1 in 19 people in Ireland are thought to carry the altered CFTR gene, all newborn children in Ireland are tested for cystic fibrosis as part of the newborn blood spot screening. This is also known as the heel prick test. If your child's heel prick test alerts the doctors to cystic fibrosis, then your child will have a sweat test. This tests for the amount of salt present on the skin. In cystic fibrosis, there's a dysregulation of chloride, and this causes excessive salt to be in your child's sweat. Okay, so Rachel, bring us back to the hospital. How did it feel? Obviously, you had James at home, so suddenly you had this gorgeous little baby girl. Were you just so excited to have a little girl?
I was so ecstatic. Like, I was so just amazed, and she was beautiful, and I was like, oh my god, this is just. And we had found out that it was a girl. We'd actually found out on Christmas Day. We got, had the test, we got them to write it down, and we opened it on Christmas Day, which was really cute.
Oh my god.
Really nice.
First of all, how did you have the willpower?
I gave it to my mom, and I was like, don't give us this until Christmas Day.
Oh my god, that's such a lovely idea.
Yeah, it was really nice.
It's so funny because I have 3 kids, and on our first child, we told no one that we knew what we were having. We were like, no surprise. No, like, I had to find out. I can't deal with mystery. So we just pretended we didn't know. And I was so shocked. I was having a girl because I have 3 older brothers, and Alan's family hadn't had a girl in something like 100 years. Like, it was ridiculous. So we were like, oh my God, so surprised. And I was like, I don't know what to do with girls. Like, I grew up with boys, and it's just, you know. And then on my second one, we found out. And on my third one, I remember we went to find out and the baby wasn't in the correct position. And we were really disappointed leaving the scan that we couldn't find out. And Alan went back to work anyway, because he had literally taken time off for the appointment. And I couldn't cope. I didn't tell him because I knew he'd kill me. And I rang up some private scanning place and booked an appointment for later that day.
Sheena, oh my God.
I just had to know. It's like, what is wrong with you? But anyway, so I definitely wouldn't have had the willpower to hold it till Christmas Day. That's
we didn't know for James, but I knew it was a boy. Like, I would have been shocked if it came out a girl. Yeah, like we didn't know, but we knew. Oh yeah, no, you definitely wouldn't have had the willpower.
No, I'd have ripped that. I'd have broken into my mother's house and ripped it off her. I wouldn't have been able to cope. Okay, everything is beautiful. You've had your little girl. Obviously, in the hospitals, as we've just discussed there during, I suppose, the explanation on diagnosis, they do what's called the heel prick test. And one of the things they test for is CF. So was that the first mention of CFT, or when was it first mentioned?
Honestly, no, even doing the heel prick test, because James had his heel prick test in the hospital, and at the time I asked, what is a test for? They give you a thing and they just kind of say, rare things, don't worry about it, very unlikely. And then with James, he didn't have CF, so it was fine, never heard anything again. So when they did it on Eva, I was just like, oh, the heel prick test. And at the time, but yeah, I actually remember they came into the room and she was like, I'm just going to take the baby away to do the heel prick test. And I was like, oh, no, I'll come with you, or do it in here. So I never wanted to be apart from her. And so I went with and they did it. And I didn't even ask again. They probably left the little card thing that it's for, but I was just like, oh, rare diseases. Naively, my first kid was fine. This one's probably fine too. Didn't think about it really.
Yeah. So when was the first time that it was mentioned then?
So We went home, everything was fine. And like, I don't remember her not putting on weight when I was at home in those couple of weeks. But 2 weeks in, the public health nurse came and said, look, I have to repeat the heel prick test. They didn't take enough blood for the first one. And I was like, I was thinking, oh no, you have to do the heel prick test again. Like, oh, this is terrible. My poor little girl has to go through the heel prick again. Like, really, do you have to do it? Like, that was my reaction. And she was like, yeah, we have to do it. So she did the heel prick again in my house. And, she was asking, like, is there anything going on? Is there anything you're worried about? And James was not a baby who got sick at all. Like, I don't remember him vomiting. I was like, what are these?
Muslins.
Yeah, the muslins. I was like, what are these even for? Like, I don't know. Like, he never got sick. And but Eva would eat, and then she'd vomit, like, really kind of, like, I remember saying to the nurse, like, it's quite, like, it's like projectile vomiting, like, when she vomits afterwards. And the nurse was like, okay, well, it might just be, a position you're holding her in, or, the usual kind of stuff, and just kind of talk to me, whatever, about it. But she was eating, so we were just, okay, grand. But then she was born on Tuesday. 3 weeks, that Tuesday, 3 weeks, I got a phone call in the afternoon, and it was the CF nurse in Crumlin Hospital. And she just said, hi, is this Rachel? Look, we think Eva has cystic fibrosis, and you need to come in to us tomorrow morning. So we can do what's called a sweat test and test her for this. And I was like, sorry, I think I've got the wrong number. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, what? And I was like, no, I think there's some mistake. Like, there was a repeat. I just thought it was a mistake. I was like, this is wrong. Like, they've got this wrong. But I was totally freaking out. Like, I was like, it was like a huge anxiety, like pounding heart, like all that stuff. Like, I was just like, what is going on here? Like, this is a mistake. It's a horrendous one. Like, yeah. But I did believe it was a mistake. But anyway, she was like, you need to come here tomorrow to this place. I'll meet you and we'll go through everything from there. And she was like, please don't Google anything tonight. Everything's out of date about cystic fibrosis, and we will explain everything to you tomorrow. And I was like, okay.
Because I was just going to say, the first thing I'd do is like...
Yeah, well, obviously the first thing I did was that anyway. Obviously.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, you definitely would have been able to hold back, but I was not.
I'd have registered for some sort of medical degree to find out more.
Like, I was deep diving in there, and so while I waited, Jay came home. I told him, he was like, okay, like, we had to just do the practicalities of like, okay, let's get James to Granny, let's do, all of that stuff for the morning. And then, but like, I just lay awake all night with Eva asleep on top of me, like, reading about cystic fibrosis. And I was like, it was like I'd been hit by a truck or something. Like, it was like the most horrendous thing I've ever felt, ever.
How did it feel to have to talk to Jason about it? And, I suppose, you wonder how people cope, and everyone copes so differently. And to tell someone bad news ever, even though, we know now that there's been so much advancement in the care of cystic fibrosis patients, but ultimately, it's not a good diagnosis. Like, it's not one that you want,
No, it certainly isn't.
So to share that, how did that feel?
Yeah, I actually remember, it's like one of those kind of like a snapshot of, like, I can remember him coming home, because he was like rushing home, like he was really excited to come home to his new baby and everything, and like coming in the door and like, hey. And I was like, okay, you're going to have to sit down, and like, yeah, it was just, well, yeah. I mean, it's everything you can imagine of like awfulness and not understanding. We didn't understand anything about it really. So we were just like, it's like you were just like thrown out into the sea or something. That's how it felt, I think. Like, we were both looking at each other going like, I don't understand either. I don't understand. And like, me mainly, I was like, it's not going to be true,
And I think actually, because I'm here while you're speaking, thinking about the timing, and I think they did it in a way, like, that's kind of the perfect timing. You want a heads up, so to be told the day before, so that you can just, even if, you still didn't believe it, you could have some information going into any conversation. you could do and have some time to adjust your headspace maybe, but not to leave you more than one night, because that would have been torture.
Or torture. And also, and in fairness, it was like, you know, whatever we can say about our health system, I found the care and the treatment and like the contact with her CF team and everything has been excellent. Like, and it was, we were only like, they rang me at around like 4:30, 5 that afternoon, and we were in at 9 a.m. the next morning, met, talked to, supported. Yeah, Eva was, they do a thing called a sweat test, where they test the amount of salt in the baby's sweat to see if it's elevated, because that's a symptom. And then we were sent home for a few hours while they kind of get the results of this. And in those few hours, I was really clinging on to like, no, it's not going to be, it's going to be negative. And Jay was like, look, we're going to go back in and they're going to tell us, they're going to confirm that she has this. He had to kind of say that to me and really pull me out of like,
the denial.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I have found the care and like the process of it was really quick and supportive and good.
So obviously it was someone from the CF team that rang you the first day. So I was going to ask how quick all that kicked in, but obviously immediately is the answer.
Yeah, immediately, yes. The next morning was a sweat test, and that afternoon we went back in and met her doctor, who had rang the day before and who had been there that morning. And they sat down with us and explained that Eva did have cystic fibrosis and explained a bit about what that was and what that meant. Like, and all the time it's just like me and Jay sitting next to each other and me like feeding Eva, like holding this tiny baby and feeling like you're in a dream or something, not a dream, a nightmare, like just a film, you know, that kind of feeling when those bad things happen, you're like, this is not real.
Outer body. Yeah.
Totally.
Haze.
But it was very fast. And then, you know, I think so that Tuesday, then a Wednesday, and then maybe on the Friday or the Thursday or Friday, we went in and met her team to get like her meds and get her started on all that stuff, and her team of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when were you first told about Cystic Fibrosis Ireland?
I think I found it myself, or like it was mentioned, like, you know, when you start to tell people about it, or like it probably comes up as you're looking it up and stuff.
Yeah.
And I contacted them relatively early, you know, because and just to say like, look, I'm here, my daughter has this diagnosis, and they were so helpful. And even just like at the very beginning, they put me in contact with, you know, they have kind of people who work for the charity who have cystic fibrosis, who are then kind of supporters of people in my position who will, like, you know, just have a phone conversation with me about what it is, what life is, just a support there to kind of explain things further to you, or to just be a support, you know, which was really, really nice. They offer, which I took up, they pay for counselling, for a certain number of counselling sessions for you. And yeah, so I reached out to them pretty early. But I mean, I think you could, you know, I could have put that off for ages, because there was kind of a denial around like that this is, I didn't want to, at the beginning, it's very hard to even tell people about it, because you don't want it to be real, you know? You're like, I don't want to say this about my daughter because I don't want it to be real. I don't want to be in contact with that charity because I don't want this to be part of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, rejecting it in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it takes a while to come around to all that stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I assume that the CF team and your own research online, I think it is important to say to people that Cystic Fibrosis Ireland, which is cfireland.ie, have, you know, accurate information, because as you mentioned there earlier, there's nothing worse than Dr. Google and reading out-of-date information, because it's so important to read the current situation, because realistically the, I suppose, quality of life and life expectancy and everything of cystic fibrosis patients has changed so dramatically over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And new medications are coming all the time. I might just take this little minute to explain some of the medications used in cystic fibrosis and why they might be used. There's lots of different medications used for the treatment of cystic fibrosis. Historically, their sole purpose would be to relieve symptoms and help prevent complications. Examples of medications that would be used to promote good lung health: inhalers or nebulizers to help open up the airways, oral antibiotics, which are used to prevent chest infections or as backup treatments to treat a chest infection, physiotherapy, to help clear mucus, sinus rinses and sprays to help flush some of the mucus out of the sinuses. Supplemental oxygen is also needed at times when oxygen levels are low, and sometimes cystic fibrosis patients will need hospitalisation and intravenous antibiotic therapy. Ways to help improve gastrointestinal symptoms, so tummy symptoms, which are a result of inadequate enzymes to break down and assist with the absorption of vitamins, minerals and fats from your food, include a high calorie diet, taking oral enzymes to help digest and absorb your food, taking special multivitamins and supplements, and sometimes people need anti-reflux medicines that help with stomach acid, or laxatives to help increase bowel movements and prevent constipation. Sometimes people with cystic fibrosis will need peg feeding, which is a supplemental type of feeding to help with weight gain. In significantly advanced patients where their lung function is extremely poor, a lung transplant is an option. It's a life-saving operation. Unfortunately, it's not a cure for cystic fibrosis. Sometimes people with cystic fibrosis also get CF or D, which is cystic fibrosis related diabetes. This needs to be managed alongside their other symptoms. The good news is that there are another group of medications which have been introduced and are now being used in Ireland. These are medications that actually impact on the working of the CFTR gene. So these work by helping more chloride ions to pass into and out of the cells, which help to keep a balance of salt and water in certain organs, such as the lungs. This means that you're treating the problem at its origin and not treating the complications as they arise. This is a really significant development in the treatment of cystic fibrosis. Rachel, when did you find out, or how does it work in terms of, obviously there I was speaking about medications which work for specific types of genetic mutation. So did you find out, what type of mutation affected Eva at that stage, or did her treatment start generically, or how did that work?
We found out straight away, after the sweat test that afternoon, that Eva was double delta F508.
And that is the most common form of genetic mutation, with it accounting for more than 55.5% of CF in Ireland. There is other mutations like one of the G551D gene, which is 15% in Ireland, and R117H, which is 6%. But there are 7 mutations of the CFTR gene, which account for 80% of CF cases in Ireland. And obviously the different types of medication act on different mutations. So I have to say I'm shocked and surprised out of pure ignorance that you found out that day. I don't know why I thought that process of finding out would be so long and hard. It's great that you know what you're dealing with straight away.
Yeah, I guess they must do that, not via the sweat test, they do that via the blood test, so they kind of know, anyway. But you're like, and so straight away they were able to tell us, there is medication that your daughter will be on, by the time she's 2, which Eva just started, or can be when she was 2, and will be on a newer drug, which is a kind of a triple combination drug, when it is approved from age 2 to 6. It's currently approved from age 6 and over for people who are double delta F508 like Eva, or people who have one F508 mutation and another mutation. However, there was actually a protest last week outside the Dáil because there is a group of 35 children who have the one delta F508 mutation and one other mutation who somehow were left off. It seems like they were left off the original contract that was made between the HSE and Vertex, the pharmaceutical company. They were left off the contract somehow, and so don't have access to Kaftrio, don't have access to this life-changing drug at the moment. So they're kind of left out of that. It seems like a contractual mistake, but obviously there was, this is really, really heartbreaking and infuriating and crazy to deal with for them and for their families, and because the drug is there and they feel like they should be on it. And in other countries in Europe, kids are on it who have their mutations. So they're calling for the HSE and Vertex to try and sort the problem out. That's just an aside.
No, that's so hard, because, you know, when you know there's something out there that could help your child and every other child around you with, you know, different specific mutations are getting treatment. Yeah. Like, that's an innate injustice if it's there. Like, you can understand if there is no help or drug available for a specific mutation, but when there is, it's not okay. No.
I know. I mean, it must be beyond, like, CF is so hard to deal with emotionally as a parent anyway. And obviously as a child, and these children are between 6 and 11, so they know what's going on, you know. And so for them to know that, and that this is a progressive disease, every day counts, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, it just must be so infuriating for those parents.
It's unnecessary, and that's the worst of it, you know. And that's
it seems like that, and like exactly, unnecessary. And
okay, so I suppose in terms of Eva's medication, then what was a typical day like, do you know, from once you got diagnosis? And then obviously I know you've recently had the addition of Orkambi, but what does your day look like in terms of Eva's care?
Okay, so from the beginning, and it's certainly at the very beginning, it's a bit of a minefield. You're like, what? I can't believe I have to give this kid all this stuff. They're tiny. I'm trying to feed them. Okay, so the day from 3 weeks, she would have had to take Creon, which is enzyme replacements. They're enzymes that she takes because cystic fibrosis doesn't just affect your lungs, it affects your pancreas and digestive system. And her pancreas is a little bit blocked and doesn't release
enzymes
to digest her food. So you replace those. So before she would breastfeed, at 3 weeks, she's breastfeeding all the time. You had to give her her enzymes on a little bit of apple puree, because you give it in something acidic. So like, it goes against everything that you think. You're like, I'm not meant to be giving her this stuff, you know, like solid anything. But anyway, that you give her a tiny bit of apple and before she eats each time, and that helps her digest the milk. Fatty foods and protein is what they need to take the enzymes with. So she'd have that every time she fed. And then twice a day, she'd have to take a really tiny little amount. Well, it's tiny when we look at it, but it's not tiny for a baby, of salt solution, because people with CF lose a lot more salt in their sweat. Babies lose a lot more, and they need the salt to grow. So you have to kind of replace that. So she'd have to take salt solution twice a day, which is like spraying salt water into your baby's mouth, like seawater into your baby's mouth.
I can imagine that.
Them to be like, whoa.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine that went down a treat.
A treat, exactly. And then she was also on a prophylactic dose of antibiotic twice a day. And that was in case she got any sort of infection, that antibiotic would already start fighting it. And then if she really was starting to get sick, you'd double the dose to kind of like a fighting dose of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And then physio.
Okay. And the physio, is that something you were able to do yourself on her?
Yes. Yeah. And when she's a baby, it's just like bouncing her on a ball, like on an exercise ball, and you're bouncing her just to kind of get air moving through her lungs. And then she'd have a little a mask that she wears over her face or over her nose and mouth, and it creates resistance as she breathes out. Okay. So she's kind of like using her lungs to kind of push more air out and kind of exercise her lungs a bit. So trying to just keep her lungs clear and healthy.
I know with CF, obviously it affects every child so differently. There are many kids who might get to maybe 2 or 3 before having any symptoms. So Eva obviously had issues early on. Like, you'd had one baby before. I'm not going to say having a newborn is easy, but, you know, it must have seemed easy in comparison.
Yeah, I was like, oh, remember that. You didn't have to do all this other stuff. Yeah, like at the beginning, it's really just, if you're a new mom, and like, if it was your first one, you'd just be like, what the hell? But even with the second one, it's just like, I'm crying, she's crying, I don't want to give her this stuff, she doesn't want this stuff. Like, I have to get it into her. She's spitting it out. It's throat, it's just like, it's really hard. And like, even just like the dosages and everything, I was getting them mixed up, and like, you're so frazzled and trying to do things twice a day and trying to fit everything in and trying to be normal to your other kid. And like, yeah, it was just like a lot. But then, and people kept saying to me, they're like, it just becomes part of your day. It just becomes normal. It'll become like clockwork. You'll just know how to do it. And that is what happens. But like the beginning doesn't feel like that at all.
And there's so much learning. Like they're even saying, obviously to use your enzymes with fatty foods and protein. It's like
dose them the right amount and all that stuff. Yeah.
Like you sound like a pharmacist now.
Yeah. Like you do become an expert in the disease that you're
living with.
Life. Yeah. So you're right. Like CF completely affects one kid to the next and one person to the next very differently. And in one way, Eva's actually been really good and really healthy. It's really unlucky that Eva has cystic fibrosis. Like it's really against the odds that you get it. Yeah. Really, even like for us, it's a 1 in 4 chance that our kids will have cystic fibrosis. If we have another child, there's a 1 in 4 chance. So if we had another baby, we'd have IVF to make sure. But like just in general in the population, it's so unlikely. So it's really unlucky. But we do feel like it is lucky that she's born now and that it's caught when she's 3 weeks. So she's treated. They're given Creon, the enzymes from the age of 3 weeks. So they put on weight. And they're given special CF vitamins. From that age, so they have the right amount of vitamins, so her vitamin levels are okay. So even when she gets infections, she can fight them better, because she's at the right weight because she's being treated.
And for things like the salt, as she gets older, she won't have to be drinking salt solutions. She'll be able to add salt to her diet.
Yeah, and actually that after one, you don't give the salt solution anymore. Yeah, it's just like, and actually we don't even add extra salt. It's just like Irish food we cook with salt, like. Yeah, like that's what the nurses say. They're like, look, in Ireland we don't really add extra salt. Like it's just, we cook with enough salt anyway. Yeah. I might add, like she likes tomatoes and I'd sprinkle salt on them, whereas I wouldn't do that with my son. But like, yeah,
just subtly and where necessary, just to be conscious of it. And I suppose even things like, when it's hot weather and, even as she gets older, just general exercise, and sweating, just to replace the salt.
Exactly.
So it's mad because even talking to you, I'm imagining how instinctive it becomes. But I definitely can only start to imagine how overwhelming it was at the beginning, because every mum knows that having a newborn, there's enough to adapt to. Yeah.
It's just that multiplied by so much as well. But like, you're just worried about all your kids all the time anyway.
You just were explaining there that any future children you have would have a 1 in 4 chance of having CF. And this is to do with the likelihood of passing one CF gene each again. So 25% chance of being born with CF, 50% chance of being a healthy carrier. So having one gene
what I have and what Jason has.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then a 25% chance of getting the 2 non-affected genes from both of you and not having CF at all or being a carrier. I'm just interested, you said there, obviously, if you ever decided to have another child, that you could have IVF. So, in essence, have your and Jason's baby and, be sure that genetically they're not, as much as they can tell at that stage. I think they say that it's not 100%, but that they won't have cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
You're saying there that that's something that, you would do rather than, I suppose, just...
take the risk.
Yeah. You don't even have to talk about it from a personal perspective, but from talking to other mums, like, is that commonly done?
Do you know what? I actually don't know. For us, I think it's probably just that we're done with our 2 and so we're not going to have to make that choice.
Yeah. And I think it's just good to highlight it as a possibility for any parents of children who have cystic fibrosis to just
And you get genetic counselling, and this is where they tell you about like that option and stuff. Like when if your child is diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, you'll be referred on to a genetic counsellor, and we'll have a session with them, and they'll explain like all the genetics that led to this and how you can go on to have more children and what the risks are if you do it naturally, and what so that you get that all explained to you completely by a professional.
That's really good, because as you said there, everyone is different, and it's nice to make an informed choice.
Yeah.
I suppose the advance in medication with, the relatively recent introduction of Orkambi and other similar drugs, like how does that make you feel? And how did you feel knowing that Eva would be starting on Orkambi at 2?
I just wanted to get her on it. These drugs actually, like, they're not treating the symptoms, they treat the problem.
The whole thing about it for people to understand is that protein is literally creating this fluid which protects our organs and helps to prevent infection and, lubricates them all and keeps them healthy. So
yeah,
it is amazing, because then you're intercepting potential damage that would have been done otherwise.
Yeah. Now she's on Orkambi and I'm delighted, and she's tolerating it really well, because the fear was like, oh, maybe she'll have a bad reaction to this. Maybe she won't, like maybe there'll be some reason that she can't stay on it. And that was a fear of ours. But no, she's tolerating it well. So that's good. But now I'm just, when is Kaftrio going to be okay? Because this is even better. So it's just like always this kind of like, come on, I want it now. You know what I mean? I want it for her now, to protect her, and I can, even though Eva's well, her doctor would say she's well, she hasn't had, hospital admissions, touch wood and stuff. But I can see that Orkambi has made a difference. I can see symptoms wise, or even like how salty she tastes, like you can taste the salt, like that's reduced. It's working, so I want the better thing. Like I want there to be a cure, you know what I mean? But like, if not, I want her to be on Kaftrio quick. Come on, hurry up, do the trials. Like that's how I feel.
Because it's unreal to think that cystic fibrosis used to be a childhood illness, because it was a fatal childhood illness. It's certainly moving towards, now obviously look, it's still life limiting, but it's moving towards chronic disease. And that's what you want. To be able to manage a disease is a completely different thing from a terminal diagnosis. And I just think if we've changed that much in 20 years, there's so much hope out there.
I have to say, like, although there is the underlying anxiety of her having CF, she's just a normal little 2-year-old having a great time running around on the trampoline fighting with her brother. She's really feisty, and she just, runs rings around him, and like she's gorgeous and laughing, and she doesn't know that she has CF, and she's just like living her life and having a good time. It's brilliant. So sometimes I do forget all those medications and stuff do become just part of your day, and you forget. And then you sometimes I clock like somebody looking, what's she giving her daughter? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is not a normal thing.
I'm wondering about support. And I know you spoke earlier about the initial instinct of not wanting to talk about Eva's diagnosis, because obviously it's painful. How then did you find telling your friends and family? How have you found support or understanding of the condition since then?
Telling people is really hard, because it makes it real. I think that's what I struggled with. Like, I don't want to tell them. It makes it real, saying it out loud and stuff. But like, obviously you have to tell people. And like, I told my close friends, and they were great. Like, people are so much more in the know after COVID, because like we understand spreading germs and spreading viruses and coughs and how that can be dangerous. And that's what it is for people with cystic fibrosis. Flu, colds, coughs, respiratory illnesses can damage their lungs, which leads to shortening of their life. And like, that's what it is. It's like, that's why you have to explain it to people so that they understand. Like, please do not come to our house if you've got a cold or a cough. Like, because it will shorten her life. Before, I think I would have been like I've got a cold, it's grand. Like, we all understand a bit more since COVID and stuff, but it is still tricky, and people are kind of more lax now again. But like, support from friends has been great. Like, they're your friends. They don't want you to see something sad happen to you or something. And especially other mothers are just like, oh my God, like, I can't even imagine that, and like, they can't, because I couldn't imagine it before. I couldn't imagine what it is to have a child with a sickness that won't go away. Like, it's just like, when your kid's sick, you're like, God, my kid's sick, like, when is this going to get better? But to have one that you can't make it go away for them, it's something else, and you just, I couldn't imagine it before it. And so I know that other people can't imagine it, and they just go, that must be awful. But people are great. Last year, actually, for CF Ireland, 20 of my friends from school, we were 20 years out of school, and 20 of my friends from school ran the women's mini marathon and raised 20 grand for CF Ireland. So that was lovely.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It was lovely. It felt like, it's just like people coming together because they want to do something. They want to be helpful and
that's
show that they care.
Yeah. That's people's way, because obviously it's very little that anyone can do to help you on a practical level.
Yeah.
But by raising funds for CF Ireland, like, I just think that kind of thing is so special, and I suppose it's important to take all of that in on the dark days, so that people want the best for you and Eva. Absolutely.
And it was really, really, like, it really meant a lot. Like, the money raised was great, but really it was just like the fact that people did this, and the support, the feeling of support from it was lovely.
People care.
Really, really nice. Yeah. And the thing is, all the stuff like that, giving your kid the medication and all the strain it causes as a parent, like, you don't care about it for yourself. You're like, I just don't want my kid to have this. I don't want it for them. It's not that I don't want the extra effort from whatever, all that stuff that you have to learn and you have to do and everything. You don't care about it. You're like, I'll do all that. I just don't want this for my child.
I can totally imagine the frustration. Anything you could do, like, you'd rather do it for yourself than give it to her, do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, look, this, I just wanted to have the same opportunity that every other child has. And I think that's what every parent feels about their kid.
Is there such a thing as cystic fibrosis parents support groups? Obviously you can get support from your friends who don't maybe fully understand because they haven't had to engross their life with cystic fibrosis, but maybe talking to other people who are in the same boat as well. Is that helpful? Or
there's a cystic fibrosis mommies group, I think it's on Facebook, and at the beginning I was like, I can't hear other people's stories, or like, I just wasn't able for it at the beginning. And I'm not really on I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not really on lots of social media stuff at all. So I aren't actually involved in those groups, but I was put in touch with another mom whose daughter was born about 8 months before Eva. It was their first daughter, and she has the same gene mutations as Eva, and we talk to each other regularly. We were just put in touch through a mutual friend, and now we talk to each other regularly and, share information. She's involved in the moms group, and she finds it really good and helpful, and that community really good. There is definitely a really, like, strong cystic fibrosis community of people who are supportive to each other. The thing about people with cystic fibrosis is they can't hang out together because they can pass certain germs that only, like, people with cystic fibrosis might pass to each other.
Yeah.
So, like, Saoirse and Eva won't ever get to really hang out with each other in person, So that's really sad. It's such a strong community, but then the people can't, like, the people who have the disease can't actually hang out with each other.
They're isolated within it.
Yeah, so it's weird, but I think there's a really strong community of online, supporting each other.
Yeah.
And then for parents, there's that community as well. So, like, it's definitely there. For me at the beginning, I was just like, I just can't hear the reality of some sad stories or some.
Yeah.
It was too much for me. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I just need to deal with every day of what's going on for Eva. I can't, because your mind can spiral out of control, I guess.
As we said earlier, every child is affected differently. So you're maybe having extreme situations thrown at you from everything, like worst case scenarios, or that won't ever apply to your child. And
or they might, but I don't want to think about them now. I'll deal with them then, And someone close friend of mine just said to me, like, you got to just go day by day. Like, you just have to take it day by day. And, like, you really do. That is how I have to do it, because because at the beginning, my mind was gone to like, what's going to happen, imagining scenarios and like, what's the point, isn't it? It's just too draining.
Yeah.
And so I think, I just have to do day by day.
I think it kind of mirrors what we were saying earlier about anxiety. You can't take on the burden of every possibility. As you said there, it makes a lot of sense to me what you're saying, you're doing, you know, dealing with it one day at a time and one issue at a time. And there's no point in thinking to the future, because the future will change, because everything surrounding cystic fibrosis is changing.
Yeah.
And in terms of outcomes, there's been a dramatic difference, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But, you know, these medications that have come on that affect the actual function of the mutated gene protein, like we haven't seen the positive effect of those yet. So,
no,
you know,
exactly.
that's all good things to come.
Yeah, you know, I think exactly, like we haven't been able to do the studies because the drugs haven't been around yet. So there isn't studies to say like, this is how effective these things are. This is how much longer they make people live, or this is how much better people's day-to-day lives with cystic fibrosis are with these drugs, because they've only been around such a short time. So there isn't that evidence yet to present, but anecdotal evidence from people who have been on it, or especially people who are older with cystic fibrosis, you know, people in their 30s, and then they're put on Kaftrio and like their lung function goes up and they are in hospital so much less, and they're able to go back to work and when they weren't before, you know, like all these things, like that's, well, I mean, it's evidence enough, like for these people to be able to live better lives and go, oh, maybe I'll, you know, plan a future instead of going when I'm, you know, not being able to do that for themselves, you know.
It's life changing.
So, totally life changing. Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for talking to me today. And I hope Eva is as well tomorrow as she was today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insight into cystic fibrosis. It's been totally enlightening in terms of family life and the reality and the hope that there is for the future. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sheena.
If you enjoy listening to a WonderBaba podcast, I'd be really grateful if you could follow or subscribe and leave a review. It really helps to support the show. Thank you.